All right, so welcome everybody. I'm Allison Field-Juma. I'm the Executive Director of OARS, your watershed organization for the Sudbury, Assabet, and Concord Rivers, in case you don't know me or us, but I think you probably do. Thank you so much for coming today. This is, how do I describe this, Kristen? This webinar is really through the Weed Warriors program of the Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area for the Siwaska watershed. And we can go around and make introductions, and maybe Kristen, you can say a word about who all we are. I will just start off by saying that OARS has been managing Water Chestnut for, Julia just counted it, 15 years? I don't know, something like that.
2008 is when we started.
Yeah, so many years in various ways. And most recently, well, we were involved with mapping several years ago, 2014, 2016. But then we ended up hiring a team of two very able-bodied college students, usually, to manage, sort of pull out water chestnut wherever they saw it in many sections of our rivers. And because of some of your efforts and our effort and various people's efforts, most places we don't have to do that anymore. And we really wanted to move over into a volunteer-based system. There are still some bits that are bad and will be managed in other ways. But SISMA was setting up this Weed Warriors program, and we felt it would be very appropriate timing for us to transition to this kind of system. So that's kind of why we're all here today. Julia's going to make a presentation. Julia from OARS, who I'll introduce in a second, will make a presentation about what we know about managing water chestnut, what we've learned. And we recognize that a lot of you have been intimately involved with this plant as well. So what we'll do is listen to Julia's presentation. If you have clarifying questions, you can raise your hand in one way or another, or shout. And then we'll have a good chunk of time at the end for questions and answers and discussion, so that we can cover all of that. And so I'm just going to go around and just ask you if you could just say your name, which community or organization you're with, and like in a very short sentence, whether you've encountered water chestnut management before, or done anything in any way. So if I could just go around the room, so to speak, and let's start with Jeff, who we know is now from Maynard.
Yeah, thanks. It's good to be here. I've been involved with the pulling the water chestnut probably for about 15 years. I just stumbled across it and said, what the heck is this blocking up the channel on the Assabet? And I looked it up on the state website, and it received instructions to pull it out by hand, which I started doing, and I've kind of become obsessed by it. I basically have been patrolling primarily the 5-mile stretch between the dam in Gleasondale down to the Ben Smith Dam in Maynard, and over the past few years beyond that, particularly last year up in above the dam in Gleasondale and above Hudson. But yeah, it's what I do all summer. I'm out there. I pulled over 10,000 plants last season, counting them by their tails, the little nut, not by their heads. And I have some experience to share on that. I'm pretty good at it.
Great, thank you. Yes, and we're really looking forward to hearing about your experience. And so, Jack.
I'm Jack. I'm from Marlboro. I've been working with a Weed Warrior program for a couple of years now. I also do trail maintenance work in Marlboro, and I've done a tiny bit of water chestnut, not very much. And I've also done the water quality assessment for OARS a few years ago.
Great, thank you. Jane.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jane Gruba Chevalier. I'm the Executive Director at the Concord Land Conservation Trust. And my experience is actually on the Lincoln side of the Sudbury River in Fairhaven Bay. When I was affiliated there, I did some polling. But the Concord Land Conservation Trust is launching a river stewardship pilot program this summer, and we're focusing on water chestnut. So very excited for this training. And I know I've got a number of people who will be watching this recording. So thank you. Hi, Kevin.
Great. Okay. Speaking of Kevin, Kevin.
Hi, thanks for having this. This is great. I'm with the Concord Land Conservation Trust. I'm a steward in the area. I've started doing on land weed warriors and figured it'd be a nice transition over into the water. I'm right along the Sudbury here, right by Fairhaven Bay. So I don't have experience with it. And so I'm looking forward to, I'm out on the water anyway, and let's get involved. So thanks.
Great. Ron?
Ron Chick, Framingham. Got introduced with water chestnuts back in 2015 on the Sudbury River, south of the Saxonville Dam, and have followed that and participated in hand pullings, organized them, etc. Have a fair level of experience with them.
Thank you, Ron. And Kristen.
Hi, I'm Kristen O'Brien. I'm the Conservation Restriction Manager with SVT. I'm also the chair of our Weed Warrior Subcommittee. And I have pulled pretty much every single invasive plant except for water chestnut. I know I haven't gotten out on the water, so I'm going to do it this summer. That's my plan.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We love it. That's great. Thank you. And I did want to also mention through ORS, we are sort of chairing a subcommittee of SISMA, which is the Aquatic Invasives Management Subcommittee. And what that group is folks, Jane's been part of that, but folks who have, and Ron, been managing water chestnut for some years, and generally on quite a lot of municipal people are, the ones who are in charge of programs. And what we do is we meet every spring and every fall. And in the spring, we say what our plans are. And in the fall, we say what we've done and share a lot of useful information about different kinds of methods and contractors and tools and all the rest, but all about water chestnut, recognizing that it is one invasive aquatic plant among many aquatic plants. And we need to always consider not just managing this one, but that there's succession. If you open up areas, other plants may flourish or not, depending. But we always want to think of it sort of systemically, not just as a plant all on its own. So with that, I would like to introduce Julia Carana, who's with ORS, and she has been in charge of a lot of our water chestnut management work, working with volunteers, working with our summer assistants, and she will give a presentation. And I'd like to hand it over to you, Julia, and to introduce yourself also in any other way that you like.
That's fine. Thank you all for joining us. I am grateful to have Kristen on it today because I think you're the only one without very much experience in water chestnut. And so I will get started, share my slideshow. Let's see here. And share. Great. So our plan today is to, the goal of today actually is to talk about why water chestnut is a problem, learn to identify water chestnut plants, and learn about the methods used to remove water chestnut, and then ultimately how you can help. As I go through this, I would like you to, if you have questions, and I think Allison made a comment of this, is put your questions in chat. And at the end, we will have plenty of time to talk about all these things. And so many of you have a lot of experience that it will be interesting to share experiences then. So a water chestnut is a rooted, floating aquatic plant that likes slow-moving, shallow water. It is an annual plant, not native to the United States, and characterized as an invasive species in the Siwaska watershed. It is very fast growing and quickly reproducing, and if left unattended, it easily covers an entire water body. Water chestnut has not always lived in the United States. It is native to Europe, Asia, and Africa. And in 1877, the species Trapanatans was introduced to the United States from Europe by Harvard University's Cambridge Botanical Garden. It was planted in ponds and in the area of our watershed near the Sudbury River. And by 1879, it had escaped and from the cultivated areas into the Charles River and then the Sudbury River. And ever since, it has continued to expand throughout the East Coast. Without removal, it has the capacity to spread even further. It's not going to the next slide. Okay. In lightly infested areas, you might find single rosettes spread out, and they're really actually quite pretty. And in heavily infested areas, the chestnuts start to form dense mats, if they get as thick layers as 3 plants high, and they get to look very, very ruffled. They will easily cover the entire surface of a water body, pushing out all other flora and fauna and limiting oxygen penetration, damaging habitat for fish, and making canoeing almost impossible. In late summer, my husband has seen fish stranded under a water chestnut patch on the Concord River in Billerica, jumping up actually to gasp for air. So water chestnut is an easily identifiable plant. It does not have any lookalikes. So I'll give you the brief anatomy of a water chestnut plant. You can see the nut. There's the nut. And that's where the whole plant grows from. There will be a long stem. Actually, in a minute. And the stem can grow up to 15 feet long, and allowing them to spread out and colonize all over their area that they're growing in. There's the stem, which there's the submerged leaves, which are sort of feathery looking, whorly type leaves that are get nutrients from the water. And then there's the rosette above, which is the part that you see floating on the water. And there you'll see little air pockets that help it float on the water. And then the surface leaves. And the surface leaves are sort of triangular shaped, and they sort of have a little bit of a shine to them. They're diamond shaped, and they're toothed on the edges. And they connect to the stem, and then to the bottom part that you see. So on the left, you will see a plant that is submerged under the water in sort of early May. I think Jeff, who's on this meeting, gave me this photo of just from about a week ago, I think. And you can see where the nut is, where it started to grow out of, and you can see the beginning of a little bit of roots. You can see the submerged leaves, and then the rosette is not really a rosette yet. It's underwater, and you have to look very carefully to see it. In the next photo, you can see that there's, and I think that's about 10 days later, it's already growing roots. It's got little branches that are making the secondary rosettes. And then it also has the beginning of the real rosette that's on the top first one. And in the next picture is when it hits the surface, and it's about 2 inches in diameter at that point. If you wait till mid to late July, you will see these rosettes that are floating on the water. They can be 8 to 13 inches in diameter. You can see a flower blooming in usually in late July. And if you turn it over and look on the underside, you can see there now that there's several nuts forming. And in particular, there is one big one right here. And those nuts will continue to develop until frost, and they will turn black. They will get darker and darker. They start out fleshy, they will get hard and fall to the sediment. So this graphic will make it easy and clear why water chestnut expands so quickly. So each rosette can produce 10 or more nuts. And each plant can branch out and have 5 to 10 at least, or even more, rosettes. And each rosette can produce 10 or more nuts. And so you can see why just taking out one plant, what a big difference it makes, and why we have to take them out. That's how quickly they can spread. The nuts will fall to the ground, to fall to the sediment, and then they will be viable for up to 12 years. So it's important that we get the plants out. And the seeds will drop directly below the plants in general, but they will also try to go different places. They can hitch a ride with the animals that are the birds and other animals that are in the rivers. They will float sometimes when they're still attached to the rosette. They will float to other locations when there's high water or a lot of current, especially after a big storm. That can happen. And plants can also get caught on boats and other recreation gear, allowing them to get carried downstream or to other bodies of water. So how is water chestnut managed? In our watershed, we have 3 main ways that we have done that. For large infestations, mechanical harvesters and herbicide treatment are the only options. Mechanical harvesters were first being used, but they are being used less now because they require deep water and they leave lots of pieces behind. And especially they chop up the plants, and we have milfoil in some of our rivers, and chopping them up makes those spread even quicker. So we've moved recently to herbicide treatment. An example of that where it's been effective is in Saxonville on the Sudbury River, up in the impoundment. It was completely choked out, and after a couple of years of herbicide treatment, it is getting way better. And I think you'll hear more about that in the discussion later. Herbicide treatment is expensive. So we have actually, what we're mostly talking about today is hand pulling, and that is what we really need to focus on, is getting more done more done in our area. The hand pulling is good because it allows us to really pull up the whole plants. It allows us to get into the little nooks and crannies of the rivers. And it also allows us to pull out the water chestnut that's intertwined with all kinds of other plants, and not just chewing up the whole, everything that's growing. But hand pulling is very time consuming. So we need a lot of volunteers to do that. If you are hand pulling, you will certainly need a boat or a canoe or a kayak or some other kind of boat. You will want a life jacket, which must be worn. You will need work gloves, a basket or some kind of bag to put them in. It's much better than just having them in your boat, which actually this example shows, because pieces will fall back into the river often. And it's also easier to empty your boat with them when they're in some kind of container. And everyone should be prepared to get very wet and very dirty. Wear work boots or water shoes that can get wet. So usually we've been going out pulling weeds when they're really, really big. But if you are pulling out the small plants, all you have to do is grab the very top part and then just gently move it around a bit so that you can loosen it from the soil below. And then you can gently pull up. Sometimes it takes a little bit of a tug, but you want to be pretty gentle with it. Pull up the whole plant. You're able to get it from the very top of the rosette all the way down to the nut. I will show you some examples after, and you saw that in the very first photo of the description of water chestnuts. Most of our pulling has been when the plants get quite big, and as this photo here is done in July, and the rosettes are very strong and they are just massive. So you sort of just go in and grab and pull up what you can pull. And we are recommending that you pull up the plant and try to follow down the stem all the way till you get to the roots. The roots at that point in July to August, it does not matter if they stay behind in the nut. You do want to get the stem and the little submerged leaves, because that is where new plants will grow if you leave it behind. In this example, it'll give you a little bit of something to think about. If you go out in early June, this is a photo that was sent to me by Jeff from Maynard. What he's holding in his hand here is 200 plants. This is just early in the season. And you can see here's the nuts, and you can follow all the way up, and you can see just the beginning of the rosettes. If you wait until the time we tend to go, which is late July, you will see that there are 20 plants on this kayak, front and back. So it's a lot more plant material that has to be carried and moved and composted. So to dispose of water chestnut, they are mostly water. And if you take them out and put them in a pile, they will quickly shrink down. So composting is the way to go. And if you are at a site where you are able to pull it up onto shore, there's a lot of conservation land. If there's a place that's above the flood line, above the high water flood line, we can take it up there. And this is us along the Sudbury River. This photo was taken and it's high enough up that we could just leave the leaves there and the pile just shrinks down quickly. If you are not in a location where you can do that, the other option is to truck it away. And we've trucked them away to compost heaps at farms, and we've taken them to the Assabet Wildlife Refuge and composted them there. You can take them to your transfer station if necessary. And if you are actually pulling them when they're small amounts, we suggest bagging them and taking them home and putting them in your own compost heap. The big thing to remember always is it must be away from any sort of river higher than the high level flood line. You don't want them going back into the rivers. So after you've pulled all the weeds, thought about where you're composting them, the other thing you have to do before you are done is make sure that all the pieces of weeds are cleaned off your equipment, your boat, your paddle, your life jacket, and the baskets you used. And we recommend that you wash or spray them with a 5% bleach solution and then let everything dry. This is especially important if you're traveling to a different water body. It will keep you from spreading water chestnut and other invasives. So who does the management of water chestnut pulling? ORS has been pulling weeds, as Allison has said, since 2008. We have worked with, we first started on the Assabet and Concord rivers, and we have also done some on the Sudbury River. We have worked with local organizations for corporate pulling events, community pulling events, and we've worked with partner organizations like Concord Land Conservation Trust and municipal groups and individual volunteers. And ORS has also held several ORS staff and board hand pulling days, which are a lot of fun. And all these events have been very successful in pulling large areas of water chestnut out, and we think it has made a difference. On one morning in the summer of 2021, I took a group of volunteers from a pharmaceutical company out, and they pulled 1,590 pounds of water chestnut, completely clearing a huge patch on the Sudbury River just above Southbridge Boathouse. Other initiatives ORIS has had, and Allison briefly mentioned these. She mentioned that we had, from Nyanza Superfund site, we had funding, and it helped us map in 2014 and 16 our whole river system. We have all those maps available. I've got a link down here. It's on the SISMA website, and things have changed some, but those are still the areas that we need to keep track of. And also at that time, we started hiring 2 summer people called our rapid response team to paddle down the rivers and pull out where they see emerging populations of the weeds. If they found big patches, they were to let us know, and we would get teams of volunteers out there. The other thing we had done is we made water chestnut ID cards, and they were very popular. We put them in kiosks and they disappeared completely. We printed them up twice. On the back, we had a little thing for them to send back information about what they found. We did not hear back from many people. But it was really useful I think, to get that information out. So what we have learned is that keeping water chestnut under control requires vigilant patrolling and harvesting for many years. It is fortunately a very easily identifiable and small plant, and in small infestations, we can manage it with trained volunteers doing hand pulling. So we have turned to working with SISMA's new Weed Warrior program, which was briefly described earlier. And we are hoping that through that, all of you will become volunteers, and that we will get more volunteers to come and help us with this program. We are looking to train leaders who will lead groups of volunteers and train them. And we are also looking to just get volunteers who will come on these pulls, but also people who will get trained and go out and do their own pulling. We plan in the next couple weeks, I think it's probably going to be 2 to 3 weeks, we will be doing an in-person water chestnut hand pulling training. We will get the word out through SISMA and Weed Warriors, and also through OR's website, and we will email all of you to let you know when that is taking place. So I hope you will join us for those. I have also been asked recently about when we do our programs, what are some of the special things that we do to with our volunteers. And we do, before any volunteer group, I think all volunteers need to know what to expect. So I have a little sheet that I will send out to people that are, if I'm taking out a corporate group, that tells them a little bit about water chestnut, shows them what to expect, and describes what they should wear, where to meet, and what we're going to do on that day. And I think this is very useful when you're bringing in new hand pulling volunteers. ORS also uses a waiver for all volunteer pulling events. We can offer this for you to use and adapt for your own use, for your own group, if your group feels it's necessary. We also will be having soon a site for reporting what you pull. I think it's going to be a Google form. And so I hope you will fill that out with what you find, because it's very useful for us to keep track of not only emerging populations, but the older ones, how they're doing. So I hope you will all join us through Weed Warriors and participate in hand pulls this summer. You can learn more about what we have done on our website. And I think now we will open this up to some discussion.
Great, thank you, Julia. I think Marlies Henderson joined us in the interim, and I don't know if there are other people. I think that's the full group.
A few people did, and that's when you might have thought I was getting a little distracted.
Oh, okay, you were letting people in the door. Good. Yes, and I put in the chat two things. One is the link to the SISMA, the maps of Water Chestnut, which are old now, but they do show how we were looking at the populations back in 2014 and 16, and a link to quite a comprehensive document that ORS produced that we call a water chestnut management guidance, and it has a lot of more, the detail like what Julia was describing, history, biology, different management methods, and that kind of thing. And so it's a great resource. If you have any questions, you can always just check that out too. Okay, I would like to open it up, if maybe start with if you have any questions for Julia. And let's start with Kristen.
So if you were to pull the water chestnut and the stem breaks off from the nut, is the nut then able to send up new shoots, or?
I'm not sure if the nut does, but at the stems, they have these little spots where they send their shoots out.
Okay.
And so if it's early in the season and that happens, you will probably most definitely have more. And if it's later, very late in the season, close to frost time, they probably won't develop enough to have a plant. But with our changing climate, actually, we've seen longer warm weather. And so the goal is not to leave stem and nuts behind until late, very, very late. I think that Jeff might have something to say about that because he's been watching.
Yeah, I've seen individual plants resprout rosettes up to 4 times in a season, where I know that for whatever reason the nut was jammed under something in the sediment, and the stem snapped off as I was trying to pull it. I would go back to that same location 3-4 times and find that within a week the plant had produced new rosettes that were, and I think would typically grow to maturity. I've also gone to locations where I can tell that other people have been pulling but have not removed the stems down to the root level, because the plants now, the underwater stems are regrowing and the patch survives if you just take the tops off.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would. Thank you, Jeff, for your personal observations of this. I think I have not heard that the nut itself will resprout. I think it has one chance at sprouting, but anything sort of between the nut and the, well, I can say for sure that anything above the root, it's a little hard to tell where the roots end and those feathery leaves begin, but anything above the root can resprout. And so the question in the end is, how late in the season is it? But certainly you want to get all that stem. And I think the reason for not pulling out all of the root later in the season is it can be huge and it contains a ton of sediment sometimes. And so you're sort of filling your boat with mud and root. And at that point, that's kind of a waste of your energy. So if it's later in the season and they're really huge, try to find, as Julia pointed out, that point where the feathery leaves stop and the root begins, and you could break it off there. Does that make sense to all of you out there who've been doing it?
I have a comment on it, in citizen science that I did about 3-4 years ago. Is I created 2 separate quadrants, and in one, in late July, I pulled the entire plant. And in the other group, I just cut the tops off with a pair of scissors and took the heads. And I really didn't see the regrowth at that time in the season, so that it could sustain itself to produce new nuts.
Great. I think that confirms the point that it's the timing. It affects really whether you pull out those roots and nut or not. If it's early in the season, get them. If it's later in the season, you're wasting your effort.
And the other
and
thing,
we consider the season, I mean, late July and early August is late. If it's most effective, way more efficient to do it before then.
The other thing that I did moving into August, September, and even October last year, because we didn't have a frost until late October, was just turning the plants over and picking the nuts off by hand and leaving the plant there. Because it wasn't going to be able to regenerate a new supply of fertile nuts.
Mhm.
Jeff, I don't know if you've done that, but I find that an easy way to take care of the isolates much later in the season.
I'm going to say I stick with my philosophy of trying to get the whole thing even later in the season. I've seen, the partial fragments of plants and little rosettes drift off, and seeds that are no bigger than a pea or even a lentil sprout a new plant later in the season. So I'm not really sure how late that particularly a detached or just standing plant that has some ability to still get nutrients might be able to produce a viable seed. I really don't know, but I suspect that later in the season, any seeds that are still left floating around, or they may continue to mature somehow or be viable.
Okay, Marlies?
Yeah, just that I don't think we have to wait for frost, because I find that when I look at the mill pond, which is very full of water chestnut, when the temperatures go to 50 degrees, it decreases, it dies off. It doesn't even need to frost. It's definitely lower temperature, but it doesn't have to freeze. It's way before freezing that the plants seem to die off.
Great, thank you, Marlies. And just to mention, Marlies is from Billerica, so you're referring to the impoundment in North Billerica on this Concord River.
I
want
also
to
have to, I'm sorry, but I have to leave because I have to lead a walk. So I was glad to get part of this, and I hope it's recorded that I can rewatch it.
You can.
And I mentioned in the chat what we'd learned from Ron, which I thought was very credible at the time, but now I learned from Jeff also that if you pull it early, it's best to definitely pull everything. Well, Jeff says pull everything all the time. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Marlies.
Thank
And
you.
I did want to mention one thing about the nuts. Sometimes when you pull them, the nuts don't come up, and that's all fine. And then other times when you're involved in it, you get a lot of the old nuts, and they are incredibly sharp.
Yeah.
And so just warning, they will go through flip-flops, for example.
And
right
nasty.
through. And they're nasty. And so they're not gonna, at that point, they're probably dead. They've already done their job, so that you might even see them floating on the water. Nuts that have not yet germinated are generally heavier, and they will still sink. If they're floating, they're probably not going to germinate. But the thing is that you may want to hesitate before you put them in your friendly family compost bin, because those nuts might not be great in your garden just because you don't want to step on them. So just a little word of warning. Sometimes you don't encounter those hard, old, woody nuts at all, and sometimes you do.
Plants that are left on the shore, for example, in my neighbor's yard, the squirrels really get into and eat the inside out. They kind of take care of them. Anything left on the ground becomes another source of food for squirrels.
For better or for worse.
You're right.
Great. Any other questions? What we hope is that through this webinar, and for the folks also who are watching it, that it may provide some bits of extra information for you, but it also is a resource if you want to involve other people. So if you're looking for volunteers, you want to organize a poll, or your neighbor says, oh, I'd like to do that, how do I do it? The idea is that you will have the resources and the information that you can share that with other people and involve them. You may be organizing a big poll, or you may just want to participate in one, or you may want to informally share this with people you meet and people you know. Oars may be organizing polls, but I'm not sure about that this summer. Julia, do you have any thoughts?
I imagine there will be some pulling. But I think what I would also like to point out is that I'm on the river quite often, and there are a lot of what I call lone rangers. People are going out there and just doing what they want to do. And most of them don't have much knowledge about where to leave the plants, how to pull them. And that is, if you see people like that, maybe it would be kind of nice to try to encourage them to watch the video, so that then they can at least get started doing it the right way, even if they want to work on their own. We were lucky to meet Jeff, who has really taken the time to learn and do it right. And I think he's also seeing that there's evidence, there's lots of people out there doing their own pulling without knowing what they're doing. And I see piles of weeds pulled and just right at the water line left with the nuts and everything. So it's not really helped the situation. So if you can share this with people you know who don't even want to be a leader or anything, but just want to go out and pull weeds, it will be a big help.
It's a very good inclination if they have that. And Kristen has put in the chat the link to the Weed Warrior Volunteers page. This is my website. And would you like to say a little word about that, Kristen?
Yeah, I just want to make a quick plug. So right now, the SSMA Weed Warrior program has 9 partners participating in it. So SVT, ORS, and then we have 3 municipalities that are partnering with their local land trust. So Concord, Littleton, and Lincoln. Some of our partners are doing water chestnut, but a lot of us are also doing terrestrial invasive plant management. So we have on the SSMA website, we have a tab for Weed Warriors, and there's a page just for volunteers, so you can kind of get a sense of what we would be looking for in volunteers. So if you're interested in doing more outside of June and July, please check out the volunteer page and get in touch with one of our partners.
Question, how long, when you take out, sort of 2 questions, how long are you taking out a larger group of volunteers? When you have a corporate volunteer group or just any larger group, how long do you find, for what length of time do you find is good to take them out for? And then, if you kind of have smaller volunteer groups going out, I'm thinking more of our river stewardship pilot model. What do you think is a good time frame for, and that might be like a handful of people going out at a time, because I don't want anyone to burn out or get frustrated, but also want to have enough impact. Do you have a sense of that timing?
We usually do it as a morning thing, and it would be 9 to 1 or 9 to 12. I watch very carefully if it's going to be a really hot day, take lots of water to provide for them, because you're out in the sun and really need to keep drinking, even if you're on the water. But it depends where we are. Sometimes you have to paddle a distance. And so also the other thing is, when you take a group of volunteers out, they don't often know about, if you get started at the same place you put in or what you're doing. And so you have to explain a lot. So 9 to 1 works really well for a corporate group. And I have done some that are doing sort of a community building. And then we've done them in the afternoon just because they want to go out for a drink after. But also then it would be about the same length of time.
Yeah, beer tastes really good after this.
Yeah, if you go work up in on the Sudbury River in Framingham, they like to go to Jack's Abbey after.
We can recommend where to go after, depending on where you pull. Also, just to mention it, to encourage people to offload their loads, because it's very tempting. They see, oh, here's another one, and oh, I just got to get this patch. And before you know it, they got a mountain on their boat and they can flip. My brother flipped. And oh God, then they have to pull it all out again. And not to mention that that's hazardous. So I think it's good to encourage people to consider having a reasonable amount in their boat. It also makes it easier to offload. If they put the baskets in their boat, especially if it's a canoe, it's easier to pull a basket out than it is to pull out this unconsolidated mass of weeds. So encourage people to use baskets. Some folks have systems for attaching baskets and things to the outside of kayaks. We've never done that, but I think some other folks have. So, we could find out how they do it. In Lincoln, I think, and maybe Jane with your
I think
group.
it's Concord.
Concord,
You folks have
they've
done
done it
that.
in Concord.
Yeah. So there's different methods, but all in all, you don't want to have very heavy overflowing baskets and canoes, because it's just hazardous and hard on your back. And baskets are good in particular because they have holes. And when you pull out, you get a lot of water, and you need a baler in your canoe, and the baskets let most of the water come out, so you're not trying to lift water as well.
The other thing to think about is that when we've had our rapid response team out, if they're out later in the season, they really like using canoes because the plants are big, they can get more done, get more in. But when they were doing it early, where there were just little plants, they really liked the kayaks because you could weave in and out better and get the little one. So I was able to provide them with both kinds of boats for different situations, which was really good. The other thing, Jane, I would mention when you do a corporate pull is that sometimes people actually don't want to go in a canoe, and there's always room for help on the shore, offloading the weeds, like someone who does not want to go in a canoe. So I do, people have come and just done that kind of work for us. And
we also have even sometimes it's nice to keep a tally somehow. I mean, we would like to know roughly where these things are being pulled out and how much. We could talk, maybe Julie has some ideas on that, but sometimes one person is happy just to be the tally person.
They count the baskets. They sit in
how many baskets?
They count the baskets, yes, and then we can convert, if you use the bushel baskets, we can pretty much convert what weight is, and that's how I came up with the pounds for the last summer pull for that one team. And I have the basket number, and so that's also makes people, volunteers, feel like they really did something when there comes with a large number of baskets. So when we will have our recording, we will want to know sort of the quantity, the recording form up. We will not only want to know the location and the date and time type thing, but we will want to know how much was pulled.
So I'm sorry, what did you find? A bushel basket is roughly equivalent to how much?
I have to look back up how much weight it is.
Oh, okay.
It varies by season too. One of the things that I've done is we've taken a typical basket and just counted the nutlets that are in the basket, and then just tabulated how many baskets we had pulled to make an estimate. And so if we found 200 nuts in a basket and we had 10 baskets, so then you have easy multiplier to say 2,000. I would like to reemphasize the best time for pulling is just as they're reaching the surface, which they're doing in the Sudbury River right now. I can see them out my window. I would recommend that you do the pulling between now and easily before the end of June, because the biomass that you're getting is 1 or 2 or 3% of what you would get if you're pulling in July. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense. As my experience has evolved, to be doing pullings late in the season. You do it to get isolates, but to get out there in early June is the way to go.
That's absolutely right. Okay, are there any other last minute? Yes, Kristen.
I just wanted to remind everyone that SISMA has an agreement with Paddle Boston where we can borrow up to 10 canoes and 10 kayaks a few times throughout the year at no cost, and they will bring the boats to us and take them away. So if that is something that you would find helpful, please email me, kobrien@svtweb.org. You do have to be a signatory SISMA partner to be qualified for this. And like I said, it's only a few times a year, so we would want to really maximize the number of boats we're getting.
They have been, or rather one of their members have done that for us for several years. Actually, most of the years of our pulling have brought us boats. And I think they
Well,
still
we
will
sold them
do-
the boats, so this was.
Yeah,
this was
yeah.
our,
I think also they
agreement.
will continue probably to do for oars some, but that's it's been very helpful. They've been great.
That's been
We have
super
also
helpful.
used Southbridge Boathouse. They're a little bit more iffy about it, but it's been a useful for doing a section of the Sudbury River.
Yeah, at no charge.
Yeah.
For Riverfest on June 18th, I'll be doing a demonstration hand pulling of water chestnuts. If you connect to Riverfest, and Paddle Boston is donating the canoes for that event. It'll be a bit of a historical tour of the ponded section of the Sudbury River, but also demonstration hand pulling of water chestnuts.
And so with that, good point. Thank you, Ron. We will be holding a field session. So especially for certification, if you're interested in that, it is required. But it's also super useful and it's fun. So we will let you know, excuse me, when that's scheduled, so that you can, hands-on see the critters yourself up close. So we'll let you know. And if there's no other comments or questions, we can end so that we can all get to our next Zoom meeting at 11:30, wherever we have to be. Thank you so much for joining us. It was really nice to meet some of you. Thank you for your work that a lot of you have already been doing. We're very excited about finding a way to just, in a sustainable way, keep doing this. Because as we know, they're not going away. We keep them under control. That's what we aim to do, so that we don't have to call in the herbicides and the harvesters, which are expensive and best avoided where we can. So with that, we'll close the meeting, and let's stay in touch. Feel free to contact us at ORS or Kristen at SISMA at SVT. And happy pulling, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.